It has been described as the deadliest air disaster on U.S. soil in more than 20 years, claiming the lives of 60 passengers and 4 crew members aboard American Eagle Flight 5342, which had been traveling from Wichita, Kansas, and had been on final approach for landing on runway 33 at Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport at an altitude of about 300 feet when a U.S. Army UH-60 Black Hawk utility transport helicopter carrying 3 crew members had collided with a commercial jetliner above it in planned flight path. Travel advisory: the cockpit has turned on the no feelings sign. Please extinguish all feelings and return to your proper military bearing while we conduct this examination. If you feel like crying and are looking for sympathy, you are in the wrong damn place, and probably why you did not join the military. Are we clear? Crystal City. Fireballs, explosions, and casualties are what the new SecDef calls dangerous stuff. New nomenclature to civilian audiences import emotional reactions, generally tending to bias the perspective towards a myopic view or to skew towards a political objective or other objective that has nothing to do with what occurred, only looking at immediate cues driven by prior biases arising from a personal view of how events are supposed to occur in your head. A very different perspective from professionals with years of experience and training to determine causes of incidents, actual causes of incidents involving mass casualties especially. Every victim has a damn name, so did Adolf Hitler, and a personal story that will make you cry. But the job of an investigator is to determine what exactly happened and occurred, whether particular persons were at fault and need to be punished or some other way addressed, and to develop control measures to prevent a similar occurrence from happening in the future, so you're not flying into Reagan National and get hit by another damn helicopter. So check your emotional bags before boarding. My name is Major Mike Webb, a retired field grade military officer with almost 2 decades of experience in conducting investigations. And if Uncle Sam wanted me to have feelings, he would have issued them to me. He did not, including aviation accidents and special military matters with a close nexus to national security. As official reports have confirmed, this tragedy had indeed involved. Only 6.2% of Americans are veterans, and not every veteran has the same experience. Some people are cooks, some people are infantrymen, some people are pilots, some people do many other things, play in a band. For instance, like myself, less than 1% of the entire active duty soldiers in the Army are assigned to a battalion in the elite 75th Ranger Regiment. And even in a Ranger battalion, soldiers bring different skill sets to the composite mixture of that force projection asset. Ready to go, wheels up in 18 hours. As a legal specialist assigned to 2nd Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment at Fort Lewis, formerly Fort Lewis, now Lewis McChord, I had enjoyed the unique perspective of the battalion staff in a Tactical Operations Center, or TOC, providing near real-time information to commanders engaged in operations, and as other duties as assigned, it was my responsibility to conduct investigations of training accidents and involving injuries or death, or when stuff went wrong. Aircraft fell out the sky and fell on somebody, whatever. Equipment malfunction, and then people got hurt. Similarly, only 77% of age-eligible Americans are even qualified to just enlist as a grunt infantryman. As I was, less than 77% are even qualified. And less than 1% of Americans are serving in uniform at any one time. Bottom line, life and reality isn't like the movies you saw. It doesn't go the way that it probably went in your head. So check your Call of Duty video game soldier uniform and attitude at the door. Are we clear? Crystal City. Pat 25, do you have the CRJ in sight? Stand up, hook up, proceed to the open door and get ready to wait for the green light to go, go, go. Assume a tight body position and begin to count as we descend into a perspective thus far, to my knowledge, not explored in the analysis of the fatal collision involving Priority Air Transport or PAT Aviation Asset, designated under the call sign PAT 25, a Sikorsky UH-60 Black Hawk assigned to the 12th Aviation Battalion out of Davison Army Airfield, Fort Belvoir, during a training flight. I have flown on these wonderful aircraft. I have had my feet hanging out the door, wind blowing in my face. I am very familiar with this aircraft, and also I am very familiar with Davison Army Airfield, because I was not only in the Army, I was assigned to National Security Assets on Fort Meade, where sometimes we had to call upon some helicopters to move people around. The 12th Aviation Battalion provides VIP and other helicopter airlift support across the National Capital Region, around Washington, D.C., if you don't know where the capital is. And the unit is also a part of so-called continuity of government planning to help ensure the U.S. government can continue to function following a major attack, a natural disaster, or a similar crisis. And I want you to think about that mission, because we're going to be coming back to that. In that role, the battalion's helicopters would fly senior officials and lawmakers to designated secure sites. And again, I want you to think about that mission, what they were training for, as we continue to go through this. If you have been following the news updates, all of this should just be review. We're just going to give you another perspective that you're not hearing on the news or from government officials. However, what you may not know if you are not a pilot, commercial, hobby, or even military, is that you don't just jump in an aircraft and fly wherever you wish to go, but usually have to provide some flight plan. Yes, so that those air traffic controllers everyone is discussing about how we need more of will have a good idea about where you should be up there in the friendly skies and where you would plan to go. Also, there is information if there was not a transponder on board that you normally should have, even under military regulations, but that may, of course, have been due to the special mission that they were conducting, which also may explain why we have this doomsday aircraft flying around, because they were engaged in training to prepare in the event that we had to evacuate some hotshot VIPs and senior military officials. The military is no different in every training event that is conducted. I don't care if it's PT in basic training. Everything conducted by the military is in accordance with military regulations. The reason some people say I could not join the military because it's just too regimented, as well as conducted in accordance with some plan. That's right, hope is not a plan in the Army. We do not pray that stuff works in the Army. We have to come up with a plan. Take a visit to the tomb of the unknown soldier. You want to see wonderful changing of the guard, very, very ceremonious display. And no matter when you go, it could be winter, it could be summer, it could be morning, it could be night. It's always the same, because everything in the military is done in accordance with regulations. Similarly, pilots have their rules issued by FAA. And matters like describing an aircraft within 500 feet as near mid-collision. You don't want to be running into UFOs. It was a big, big problem that everybody was concerned about a little while ago. And the military are required to abide by those same rules to ensure what? Safety, but may request authorization for a deviation from normal rules and practices that have to be signed off, chopped off by somebody, probably somebody over the rank of whoever is asking for that particular permission, which had occurred in this instance on not just an ad hoc, but as a practically permanent basis, designating this heavily congested flight corridor as the Special Flight Restricted Area, or SFRA. So we normally have this kind of interesting traffic very, very close to commercial air traffic, heavy congested area, flights inbound to Reagan National, which requires special certification from military aviation crews to even enter. Not just any just came out of flight school person can do that. And generally, with a flight ceiling imposed, however, as a safety measure at 200 feet to make sure that those people that are supposed to know what they're doing and have these qualifications operate under those rules. Just like that hard deck that you may recall up that had been penetrated by Jester when he was fleeing from Maverick in the movie Top Gun, while Maverick continued in hot pursuit, breaking those rules, and had gone on to violate more rules by buzzing the tower at Miramar. And he got into a little bit of trouble for that, even though everybody loves Tom Cruise. And from reports, the UH-60 Black Hawk, flown by Captain Rebecca Lobach, a woman, age 28, and the highest-ranking crew member aboard that aircraft, had, for whatever reason, ascended to an altitude above the designated flight ceiling. Oh no, you broke the rules of engagement, colliding with the Bombardier CRJ-700 containing 64 passengers and crew, ruining their day, resulting in 67 fatalities, 55 of whom to date have been recovered from the incident area. And if this happened then, it could happen any other day, because this is an ongoing corridor where we allow this type of training, and so it could be you when you're coming back from freaking Disneyland. Cry me a river, but in the Army we pay the captains the big bucks, not because they are nice people, because we like them and everybody loves them, but because they're responsible for the safety of themselves. You want to sit there and say, I'm the first woman this, I'm the first black this, I'm the first Martian this? Well, that's why we pay you to do that, because you're supposed to take responsibility, not sit there and say, oh, I'm a nice person, and you can't blame me for crap that I did wrong. Their crew, they are responsible for it. And also that $3 to $26 million Black Hawk aircraft they are flying, they are responsible for that, and are supposed to avoid collateral damage, like endangering the lives of non-combatants. Think about it. This is a smart bomb that blew up a school or a children in a hospital. How would you feel about who did that? Would you be sitting there saying, oh, well, you know, it was just a mistake, and she was a nice person? No, you don't do it. Same thing. Are we clear? Crystal City. Okay, in at least all military training, I don't know what you do at your job, but in military training, we often take time to review important training objectives, make sure everybody's tracking. So let's use the Jester and Maverick scenario, with which movie audiences should have at least some familiarity, as a segue to some rules of engagement that had been implemented as control and safety measures to what? Mitigate the risk to you or a bunch of school kids coming to the nation's capital, see the sights for a class field trip, only because some helicopter pilots from nearby Fort Belvoir on a continuity of operations mission need to be in practice to make sure we can evacuate some hotshots during a doomsday scenario, won't go awry doing dangerous stuff should that worst case scenario ever occur. Okay. If that real doomsday scenario is actually coming down, top secret, and they're not letting anybody in the world know about it, okay, you may be taken out. We know that from this exercise that just happened in training. One, what are our training objectives? One, well, Senator Tammy Duckworth, a former Black Hawk pilot who had an accident herself in a Black Hawk, has confirmed that this area along the Potomac that became the scene of the worst aviation disaster in 2 decades has been designated as a Special Flight Restricted Area, or SFRA. If you want to use the popular acronym in the military, SFRA. Right there along the approach route for inbound flights arriving on runway 33 at Reagan National Airport. Does that sound like a good idea that doesn't present any foreseeable risks if something might go wrong, as it just happened to have done? No, it doesn't sound like a good idea. It does not, and that is why those military pilots operating in that area, somebody up there above somebody's pay grade, decided that they must possess special certifications and training. Not just anybody can fly there, and aboard a military aircraft who is in charge to make sure that everybody aboard that crew is wheels up, ready to go, have everything that they need to have to be in that aircraft and operating in that area. The person with the brass on their collar, whether they're a man or a woman, or somebody who's man and woman, and making the big bucks to make sure that nothing goes wrong. You're not there to sit there and look pretty. And this is the loneliness of command. Whether you have 250 knuckleheads in basic training, a crew of 5,000 aboard an aircraft carrier, running around the Pacific, a platoon, running around in Vietnam like Lieutenant Calley, or when conducting limited visibility training for aviation assets on a government continuity mission near the vicinity of a major airport. It's not just a job, it's an adventure. And the authorized flight ceiling that somebody decided was good for making sure that nothing like this happens, established for this dangerous training, is 200 feet. And when you are over 100 feet over that ceiling, you just can't say oops, especially not when you have a whole bunch of people dead. The senior command is responsible for that error, regardless of what sex, what color, whatever they are, but they're also responsible for what? All of the consequences. You can't handle that responsibility, just don't take the job. It's too damn easy. Are we clear? Crystal City. Some may be familiar with Rear Admiral Grace Brewster Hopper, an American computer scientist and a mathematician who had been a pioneer of computer programming, the very first to devise the theory of machine-independent programming languages. And she used this theory to develop the Flowmatic programming language and COBOL, an early high-level programming language still in use today. And in July 1986, in the Navy's Ahoy magazine, she coined a very popular quote, "It's easier to ask forgiveness than it is to get permission." Well, that may be okay when you are playing with computers, but when pilots make mistakes, people die. And sorry cannot be all that you can say. And that is why we have this continuity of government mission just for that reason, to ensure that at least no top officials wind up like not arriving safely at their planned destination. And clearly some mistakes were made in this rehearsal. And now we are in the process at NTSB and the DOD to determine exactly why that had occurred, because we wouldn't want to have top government officials not getting to where they want to be in the event that there's a doomsday scenario. Okay, and sorry that you had to, be a fatality to that test. However, let's think outside the box for just a second, considering the maxim that an ounce of prevention is worth a load of care. Very Ben Franklin. And at some point, before we ever had an accident, some very senior officials, getting paid even more money than a captain, had determined that they had put sufficient prevention and mitigation measures in place to avert the worst aviation disaster in history. But it looks like we had some breakthrough infection. We know that they had decided to approve a deviation from regulations, removing the transponder that would permit air traffic controllers to readily locate the aircraft. Perhaps because they wanted to have realistic training, that's what they would do if this was really a doomsday scenario, and they wanted to do that. However, you may recall how the 9/11 attack terrorists had turned off their transponders to evade attempts to track their location and movements. And this made it just a little bit more difficult to find out altitude and location for those air traffic controllers that were there. But this was an accepted risk that was approved by senior defense officials. Elizabeth McCormick, a former Black Hawk pilot, had been interviewed on CBS News, and she says from her experience, even further, just to provide an extra set of eyes aboard the aircraft to provide that 360 view of potential hazards, not just two in the front looking at 180 and then one in the back trying to look at everything in the back with all the other obstructions. There should have been a fourth crew member aboard that Black Hawk UH-60. And if that fourth crew member was not present, he was responsible to address that. Or if the absence of the additional crew member had been perceived to present a risk. Again, the person with the highest rank in that aircraft, and in this case, that is 28-year-old Captain Rebecca Lobot. Welcome to the Army. We pay you as the person in charge in the Army to be that Winston Wolfe and solve problems, which sometimes means being proactive. You have to go ahead. Many, many times in my military career, I was told by my raider, I tended to tell my boss the truth even when he didn't want to hear it. I got the major, so evidently it wasn't too much of a problem, in terms of career-limiting moves, but sometimes you have to do that. Even if your objections are considered and rejected by your higher command, it is still your command responsibility, especially as an officer, to take charge and put that on the record. Same thing happens in court. That's why you hear those guys in the movies saying, I object, because they want to be able to, when they review that decision, see, yes, that's right. You did sit there and say there was something wrong at that time, and you might be right. Dead men tell no tales. So if you're not around, nobody's going to be able to sit there and say, well, she was thinking about this, or he was thinking about this. Are we clear? Crystal City. In the military, hope is not a plan. We do not even invite the chaplain to say anything during the military decision-making processes, during the briefings for military operations order. We do not pray for anything. We plan and prepare for victory to be ready to fight tonight. And a 5-paragraph military operations order does not even begin with a restatement of the mission, whatever it may be. It begins with a military intelligence officer, people who look like me, describing the situation that mission is supposed to address. And so, before we close out, let's take a look at the contingency this continuity of government mission training flight was supposed to be addressing that had people out there doing dangerous things and having people die. A nighttime scenario with limited visibility, with potentially the use of night vision devices that present their own degradations in depth perception, as anyone using night optical devices or not already knows. A doomsday scenario at night is probably after the end of the normal duty day at the Pentagon for most people. Take a look at that parking lot after 5. Practically a ghost town, and some classified doomsday scenario is occurring about which nobody in the world knows, is what these pilots were training to ensure they could complete successfully in the event that might ever possibly occur in the future. Big, movie, oh no, the aliens are attacking, whatever. Okay, imagine that happening. They were training for that. More likely than not, just from experience, a doomsday scenario would involve people already in panic and possibly a diversion of air traffic, just like we all know happened on 9/11. So it is likely, based on experience, that in the actual scenario, the control measures in place, like the 200-foot ceiling, would not even be required because there would be no flights inbound, or at least limited a reduction of the flights that are inbound. Also, inbound and outbound traffic declines sharply in the late evenings. You get 10 o'clock, midnight, not a lot of flights coming in, not a lot of people waiting for people to arrive or dropping people off to fly out, reducing congestion in air traffic. And we all know about during the pandemic, we were trying to reduce the number of people around each other. Why? So they won't infect each other. We didn't want to have any of those kind of breakthrough infections. And more likely than not, since it would be during those hours, as we all know how to do, yet for some reason the planners up there, those senior guys that approve these mitigation and prevention measures, they didn't think about this. And for some reason, even when they were prompted to consider this just 24 hours before, when an inbound flight was able to successfully avoid a helicopter and flight path, to kind of make an adjustment, adjust fire, think about, wait, there may be a credible risk that people might die because of a plane accident. But nor did the commander of this mission flight, 28-year-old Captain Rebecca Lobach, end up losing her life on us, apparently raised a suggestion to avoid endangering passengers, totally unaware that their lives are in danger. That communal responsibility thing from pandemic. And so in an after-action review, as an officer in retirement, a gray area retiree, not even eligible to receive a retirement check, doing this for free, until I attain the age of 60. I have taken the initiative and responsibility to address this issue to senior military leaders now, which apparently had not been done by the commander of that fatal flight. I really didn't have standing to kind of jump in before this. I was not totally aware that they were doing all of this. Now, of course, we all are. And so those of us who took an oath and our officers for safety, according to the chaplain, I decided, okay, well, let me just go in there and take the licks. Why? Because I took an oath. And that is what officers are supposed to do, and which they apparently didn't. You don't want to ruffle feathers, then just don't take this job. Go work someplace else. Are we clear? Crystal City. This briefing is unclassified.
This message was approved by Major Mike Webb. Honest.